When white players face the Caro-Kann defence, which is of course after 1e4, 1c6, he has two main ways he can play. He can either play a main line, or he can play one of the numerous sidelines at his disposal. Now, the main lines, which are either the classical with 3 knight c3, the advanced with 3 e5, or the Panov Botvinnik with 3 e takes d5, are all absolutely perfectly playable lines. Naturally, they're main lines for a reason, and in their own ways may offer white the small advantage he looks to gain out of every opening. Now, the reason why the Caro-Kann is played so much, and the reason why it is played by top-level players as well, is because it has this reputation for being one of the most solid answers to e4. And as a result, even though these main lines are, of course, perfectly reasonable ways to play, and I would advocate any white player to look into these, it seems that black is standing his ground in the large majority of them. And white players have become increasingly more frustrated over the years, trying to just get some sort of a pull in the position. And it seems as though it's becoming more and more difficult, certainly. So they're looking for other options, and the other options lie in the sidelines or the less analysed lines. And today I'm going to be presenting an option for white which is very dynamic. It's an option which is very double-edged as well. It has its own risks to a certain extent, but if white masters the key concepts well, and really has, let's say, a feeling for this type of position, it's a very attacking option, then I would certainly recommend it as, if not a surprise weapon, a main part of the repertoire. And the variation I'm talking about is the fantasy variation, which is characterized by the move 3f3. Now, this variation has gained, I suppose, more popularity since its huge employment at the 2010 European Championships, where we saw a plethora of top grandmasters use it. And the idea behind the variation is quite simple. I mean, in each of the other main lines we saw that after black plays d5 and of course tries to challenge in the centre, in this variation white simply says, I'm not going to give up my pawn centre. But we all know that playing f3 so early on in a king's pawn opening has its own drawbacks, and one of the big ones is, of course, the weakening of the king and the diagonal e1h4. So white has to be very careful, and in fact he has to be very careful that he doesn't get punished straight away. I mean, a lot of amateur players who might play this, who have not studied it at all, may fall into the trap which happens after d takes e4, f takes e4, and now e5, so challenging for the centre, and of course allowing the queen to come out to here. And a huge error in this position would be to take this pawn on e5, because black doesn't take the queen off, but what he does is he plays queen h4 check. And actually white can resign in this position, because he's positionally lost, if not materially lost. g3 loses to queen takes e4 check, of course, winning the rook, and king d2, well, it's hardly the sort of position that white wants to play, and black can get developed very quickly, and it's just horrible. So this is the risk element, of course. Naturally, after 4e5, we don't have to take that pawn off, and in fact we're going to analyse this variation in the DVD itself. So what I'm actually going to do is, after 3f3, I'm going to break down the 5 main replies that black has here, and he has 5 main ones. In fact, on the database I realised that I think black has played 20 different moves in this position, but clearly a lot of them aren't as good as the other 5. So that's what the DVD is going to discuss, and we're going to do it quite systematically. And I want to stress that if black knows his stuff in these lines, actually each of these 5 options are perfectly playable for black, and with best play he should have a pretty good position, but at the same time white should have a very good position, and every single line is very interesting. There's a lot of dynamic opportunities, so even though the position might be equal, a draw is probably one of the least likely results. So I ask you just to enjoy this. Of course, this is a 60-minute DVD, so we're going to be analysing the main lines and the main concepts rather than going into every single sideline and variation possible. But certainly the fantasy variation, a good try for white, and certainly one for the repertoire. So let's get straight into the DVD, and we are going to start with the move D takes e4, which I suppose is black's way to try and refute the fantasy. Let's start.